Welcome to another Early Years Learning Hub podcast. My name is Jackie Ward and I'm the founder and managing director of the Early Years Learning Hub. This episode is one of our practice sharing series where I invite teachers, educators and leaders to share their practice and tell us some of the practices that work for them. Today I'm joined by Kylie Brown, who is a teacher and assistant principal at Fernhill School for Specific Purpose, which is a school that supports children with a range of disabilities. Kylie is also a treasured part of my family. She's married to my son and the mother of my three favourite little people. Kylie, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your professional journey?
Yes, so I started off going to uni studying mainstream primary school teaching. I went to the ACU in Strathfield, and in my third year, the end of my third year, I had to do a 2-week community engagement program, which a lot of my friends at uni, we all got sent to SSP schools. And I got sent to an SSP close to my home. And yeah, I was there for 2 weeks and it was very eye-opening. I had already done some pracs at mainstream primary schools, and after the 2 weeks I just loved it. I thought, this is what I want to do. I liked the smaller groups. There was about 6 students in one class and 7 in another. And we got to do fun things, I suppose. One day we got to go out and take the students to McDonald's, and they practiced their money skills and communication skills buying their McDonald's for their lunch. We also got to go out to a park. In another class we got to spray shaving cream all over the table, and the students were practicing writing their names in the shaving cream. So a lot of fun sensory activities. I just thought, yep, this is what I want to do. So in my 4th year we could choose electives, and I did choose a special needs elective, but it didn't really I didn't have to do those. It was just the path that I knew I wanted to do. And so also when I had my casual teaching number, I did some casual work at that SSP. And I was still doing casual work in mainstream too. And yeah, I just really liked the SSP. Yeah, so my first year out of uni, I got a full-time teaching position at that SSP. And I was there for, I think, 7 years. And then another school opened up nearby. It was opening up and an AP position was available. So I went for that and I got that. And now I've been at that school for 8 years now, 8 or 9. Yeah, it's been a while.
Wow, it's so interesting, isn't it, to think how like just a little sliding doors moment can make a difference in where you end up in your teaching. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. My first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is probably related, and you've probably said a few of those things here. But what are the rewards for teachers in working with children with a disability or additional needs? What drew you to special needs teaching?
I found it more rewarding because it felt more like a caring role, and I could feel like a stronger bond with the students, maybe because there was less of them in the class, I'm not sure. But I think having that role of teaching them life skills, teaching them how to feed themselves, how to walk, how to be active members in the community, I just found more of a sense of purpose and reward in doing that. And then as I became a teacher, I've just found it more rewarding, like some of my students, hearing them talk for the first time, taking their first steps, being able to feed themselves and just developing in their emotional regulation. I find that most
Very
rewarding.
rewarding. It sounds very similar to what I find very rewarding in early childhood, actually. That idea that you can, you're really helping a person become a whole person. It's a very holistic and integrated kind of, whole world of learning going on there. My next one is, so I guess on the flip side of that, what do you find challenging? Because I think a lot of people, teachers out there who might have some children that they've, got in their classroom that do have a disability can be challenging for them. So what would you say are your biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think the challenge working with students in SSP schools, so to be in an SSP school, you have to be diagnosed with a moderate to severe disability. So we have majority of our students are non-verbal, and it's just challenging seeing them struggle without a communication, like without proper communication. Then you're likely to have behaviours, because if they can't communicate their frustrations, they can't communicate what they want, they're going to hit you or kick you so the challenge is those behaviours can hurt you as such, and hurt the SLSOs in the class too. But it's a struggle for the teacher, because we just want to help the students, and seeing them, if they don't have a proper way of communicating, that's why we say early intervention is key. We love it when the students come to our school already with a communication device, with speechy on board, with an OT on board, and the strategies in place to assist with their regulation. Then we're less likely to have those challenging behaviours. But yeah, it's challenging for us teachers to see our students dysregulated and unable to get their message across. Yeah.
You raise a really good point there, Kylie, that I think that a lot of the broader community wouldn't realise that teachers are very invested in their students and the children that they work with. So we, almost a little bit like a parent, isn't it? That we're sad for them if they can't communicate or if they're finding things challenging, It's heartbreaking.
I think my current challenge, because this year and last year I've been working with students, the older students, so year 11 and 12 students, so those transitioning out of school. Yeah, my current challenge, working with the families to navigate the NDIS, because we need to ensure that they've got the funding in place to be able to get what they need, so to transition out of school. Yeah. That's
a big job, isn't it? Teachers and educators have a big role, I think, in supporting families to navigate that system, but it's not really technically one of your kind of day-to-day jobs, but it's such a huge part of what we do, isn't it, to help and also, as you say, that transitioning people to the next stage of wherever they might be headed. And you raise a good point, because your SSP covers all the way from, you've got some students that attend that are in that preschool phase right up to year 12, haven't you? So it's a big range of ages that you support.
Yeah, from 4 years old to 19 years old.
Wow.
They've got students for. And I think another challenge as well is ensuring that what we're teaching at school is happening at home as well, because we sort of need the environments to be reciprocated.
Yeah, that's a really good point, to reinforce that learning and to embed that learning, and for children and young adults to have a chance to transfer what they're learning at school to home is really important, isn't it? So what would you say are some of the things that really help you to manage some of those violent behaviours and manage the classroom and keep everyone safe, and, all those Australian professional standards that I refer to quite a lot, keeping that environment safe and managing your space? What would you say are some of your key tips?
Key tip is your partner that you're working with. You need a great SLSO, and you need to be a team with them. I've had some very challenging behaviour students. I've had classes with just 5 students in them because they've been very violent, and we had 2 SLSOs, so myself and 2 SLSOs on the class, and we just needed to run like a well-oiled machine to ensure that there weren't going to be any major meltdowns happening. But I think overall key day-to-day routines, having routines in place helps alleviate those behaviours from happening. Using visuals and ensuring that the students are aware of what's happening next, and aware of those expectations. Knowing your student and knowing what to say and what not to say. I've had students before that would hit if you said the word no. So you've just got to know what is going to trigger those behaviours and ensure that you're saying the right things or doing the right things. At our school, we have self-regulation plans, so teachers and SLSOs, everyone needs to be aware of these plans for the students. And we work in zones of regulation, which is looking at what, the green zone, what students are like when they're ready to learn. And, this is what the behaviours that you would see with, good behaviours, sitting there ready to learn. Maybe not even sitting there, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, it looks different for everyone, so that's why it's all individualised. And then in the orange zone, when they're not feeling as regulated, what you should do, and up to the red zone. So I think having awareness of what each student looks like, then that can help prevent any of those behaviours from occurring.
That's a really good point, I think, that idea of not even trying to get into that learning zone if you can see that the child isn't there, because that's just adding more stresses to yourself and the child and everyone in the room. So I love that idea of looking for the signs and symptoms that are green, and that's the time that you, that's a time that a child's ready to learn, and then maybe other strategies and other things are more appropriate when they're in a different zone or a different colour.
And I
Love
think that
that.
teachers need to have a mentality as well that, if a student needs, you also need to know what do they need to regulate. Do they need to go have a break and go for a walk? Do they need to listen to some music? Do they need to be given a fiddle toy, a fidget toy? And have the understanding that giving them those things isn't giving them a reward for their behaviours. Like if they start vocalising loudly or rocking back and forth too much, they should be given what they need to regulate, and it's not seen as a reward for that behaviour. It's seen as something they need to get back in the green zone. Because some
Yeah.
teachers think, well, no, they're disrupting the class. I'm not going to give them what they want because they just want the swing or something like that. But yeah, it's also understanding your student and knowing whether that behaviour is dysregulation or have they gotten in a pattern where it's on purpose because they are seeking something. But
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a method most of the time of communication, isn't it? This is
well,
where
that's
I'm
why,
at. This is what I
yeah,
need
yes,
in
well, that's
order
why
to get back on
communication is
track.
important. You need to teach them to understand what it is they need and to request that, and get them to request that before they get to that next zone of
Yeah,
regulation.
some self-preemptive strategies to get them stay on track. That's awesome. So that leads us into talking about, I'd love you to share, Kylie, your processes for assessing and planning for learning. What are your key sort of approaches and what do you support children to learn?
So, similar to mainstream, we have a curriculum to teach. So, we program to each KLA. At my school currently, we use the department's Allen literacy and numeracy precursors to assess where our students are at for literacy and numeracy. And yeah, there's no formal standardized assessments for SSPs. Pretty much every student in our school has always opted out of NAPLAN. They opt out of Best Start. So I think our assessing it's different depending on the SSP school and what they choose. But it's basically ongoing formative assessment, day to day, knowing your student, knowing where they're at. And so I will just usually have, for each lesson that I plan, I'll have my own goals in mind, so linking to the curriculum goals, but also differentiated, individualized goals. And yeah, it's basically observed. And so in my lesson, I might have some students that I'm looking for, their goal is just to be involved in the lesson, just for them to participate, because that's where they're at. Some students, I might want them to make comments or an observation about the lesson. I might be looking at, are they working independently? And others on the higher end, are they able to demonstrate understanding and explain to me how something just worked in a science lesson or something, for example. So similar to mainstream, we'll have the high expectations, yet also realistic expectations. We're going to plan that's setting them up to succeed and develop independence as well. That's probably the thing with SSP students. We want them to develop independence. And yeah,
It sounds a little bit more like the approach in early childhood, which is very much less formalised sort of assessments and more observational and information gathering and analysing that learning and planning from there.
yeah, well, it is very individualized. Like we always work with families to set about the individualized goals, and depending on the SSP you're at, some schools might have lots of individualized goals, and the families decide all of those. I know 15 years ago, the families would tell us 8 goals that they wanted, and we would link them to the curriculum. And then now we more are focusing on teaching the curriculum and seeing where our students are at, and then creating those goals for where they are at and differentiating it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just a different approach, I guess. So you talked a little bit there about working with families. I'd be really interested in sort of having you unpack what would you say make great relationships with families, and what are the things that are helpers and what are the things that hinder those good relationships with families?
I think the most important thing is having an understanding and some empathy about what they're going through and what's happening in their lives living with a student with a child with disabilities. You know, I know day to day in my work it's a struggle sometimes, and yeah, you've just got to think, well, their home life, like their home living is. So definitely empathy and patience for the families. We actually had a book that we had to read at uni, and it's my favourite book from uni, and we actually shared it at our school, and the SLSOs all read it as well. It's called Lessons from My Child, and yeah, you really gain a perspective of the parents and what they're going through living with a person with a disability. And then also understanding that some of our families too, the parents might have a disability themselves, so having patience and understanding with that and just being supportive, I think that helps make great relationships with the families, trying to support them as best you can, educate them as best you can, and involve them in everything as well, communicating with them, listening to them. Sometimes, you know, they just want to be heard. Yeah, I think that definitely helps.
Some
And
great advice there, and I love that about empathy. I think all of us could learn a little lesson about that when we're working with other people. You know, just having a little bit of empathy for that person's lived experience can really help smooth over some tricky times and tricky conversations. What about working with other health professionals? I can imagine that you might need to be working quite closely with, as you said, OTs, speechies, other therapists. What's your approach to that?
we get a lot of prac students come through our school, actually, you know, medical students and uni students studying teaching, or TAFE students studying to be a SLSO. And I think an important thing with that is I explain why we're doing things so that they have an understanding of why, and they can see why. Because like we have some prac students that might come through and just think, why do I have to be here? You know, I'm not going to be working in a special needs school, so this is pointless. And so I will try to explain to them, well, you might have a patient come through that has a disability, so it's important for you to understand that they might need a communication device, and you should be an advocate for that and say, where is this patient's communication device, so I can talk to them, understanding that the patient may need to give consent for something. So understanding that that's why we're teaching these students to be able to say yes or no, because they may need it one day when they're out at the doctor's or in hospital.
I love that, being a real advocate for people with a disability and helping people to understand why these things are important.
But we have a lot of speech and OTs that come through our school, and physios. I think with the NDIS now, we can be bombarded with lots of people wanting to come into our school, and I really like about our school that we are fairly strict with the therapists that want to come in. We need to see their goals, tell us why you're coming in, what is the reason, what are you working towards with the child, and we also agree on what times that they come into, because we don't want them to come in and disrupt key learning times like in the morning. So mainly we have them come in during middle sessions or the afternoons, and yeah, they get approval from the teacher. And I also like to see reports. I feel like the speechies and OTs and that come in and give me a weekly or fortnightly, or how often they come in, like a report on what it was that they just were practicing with the student and where to next. I feel like that makes a difference between a good therapist and a not so good therapist. And yeah, our school also, if we believe that they're not the greatest therapist and they're wasting our students' NDIS funds, we will say, you know, sorry, you can't come to the school again. So you can.
I love that you guys are empowered to take charge of that situation, because I think, you know, like especially a lot of people in that early childhood space may feel a little bit intimidated. Well, the OT is coming in and we should be doing accommodating for them. But who is therefore then advocating for the rights of that child to participate in the learning of the classroom if you're not standing up for them to say, no, this is not a great time for that person to come. So, and yeah, also the idea that if it's not of benefit to the child, I think that's also a really good thing, and drawing on the reports as well. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your perspective and experience on that, Kylie. The last point I've got on my list of things that I wanted to ask you about is just if you can, you know, like how you support team members. So you've referred to your SLSOs, which is the educators that work in the room with you. Can you share some of the ways that you support your team, so not just in your classroom but in your role as a leader,
Yep.
to implement evidence-based, strength-based practices in the classroom?
Yeah, so I currently, being an AP, I'll support teachers with their teaching and planning for learning. And I think probably one of the best things that I feel works, and I think what I learnt from as well, is through co-teaching and modelling best practice. Um, we can have lesson observations and give feedback, but a lot of people don't like the idea of being watched and get nervous or, worry when things don't go as planned. But I think that's why a more relaxed teaching strategy where we join together and take turns and model best practice, I feel like that is what works best in our setting. And sharing resources as well, that's definitely helpful. I'll check in with my team regularly and check that everything's going smoothly in their class. What can I support them with? Check that their PDP goals are on track. Yeah, I just think being there for them and listening to what it is they need is very helpful for them.
I think that's a really great approach, that hand in hand working together and collaborative support, as opposed to that. I would agree, people don't like being observed and it feels a little bit of high pressure, doesn't it? So, some really good strategies there. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, Kylie?
I don't know, just that we always need teachers in special ed, and I never pictured that I would work in special ed. A lot of my friends were very surprised when I told them that I was working with special needs children. So just if you feel like a change, or you feel like you like that caring role, then why not give special education a go? See how you go.
I love that. Good promotion for the cause there to finish off on. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kylie. I've really enjoyed our chat. And also I'm going to put some links in there. The Early Years Learning Hub has a couple of courses that on some of the things we talked about, supporting children with a disability or additional need, and also helping children to self-regulate. So I'll put those links in the notes. So wrapping up, this has been another practice sharing episode of the Early Years Learning Hub podcast. And thanks again, Kylie, and looking forward to our listeners tuning in again next time.
Thanks, Jackie. Bye.